What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Female Bodybuilding Girls in Gear. I'm your host, Tommy Stiles. With me, as always, Shannon Seeley. And today we are joined by IFBB Pro and coach Emily Schubert. Emily, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. The weather is nice here in Pittsburgh. We got some snow, but it's finally melted and it's about 60 degrees out. So it's a nice day here. I'm enjoying a day off.
Yeah. Before we get started, like, share, comment, subscribe. Muscle Media Network on YouTube. That is where you'll find all the content, including this podcast. Muscle Media Facebook group. Search Muscle Media Network. Request approval, you'll be added. And thanks to our sponsor, Kodiak Bodybuilding Apparel. Train hard, die strong. So, Emily, we've been wanting to get you on. I know Shannon's really excited to talk to you today. So, rather than doing the usual and diving into your history, which we'll get to, but like that's like how most podcasts start, is like, tell us how you get started in competing. So, what are your current goals for 2024? What are you working towards?
Uh, so it's a little bit different than normal. I feel like I'm maturing as an IFBB pro. Now that I've gotten a couple seasons under my belt. The longer you do this, the more longevity becomes one of your goals. When you're in your early 20s, you beat your body up and you don't realize how much damage you're doing along the way. Now that I'm in my 30s, and I've been doing this for 5+ years. My goal this year is to make sure I'm healthy inside and out. Taking cover of a couple of different topics, like gut health is a big one for me. Currently dealing with some issues, so that's a goal of mine, is to get that handled and under control. Another one's like mobility, something along the lines of, while we're doing this, we don't really put a lot of emphasis on it. So I'm trying to catch up with that while I have some downtime. I competed a lot this past year, so this year's going to be off. And those are some of the areas outside of the gym that I want to focus on.
Yeah, gut health's it's a hot topic. I just actually had a GI map in November and had everything under the sun wrong with me. So I spent the last few months fixing my gut. Shannon's dealing with some stuff right now. I've got clients dealing with it. So it's definitely it can hold you back, and if you don't take the time to fix it. So do you want to expand on what you're dealing with? What did you find? Did you get a GI map done, or is it just like you're just feeling not 100?
Yeah. So, this past year I did actually two full preps. I did some shows in the spring and then earned my qualification. So I was competing in the fall in the Olympia. And after both sets of shows, I was dealing with some body issues, some hemorrhoids. Recently I was dealing with a fissure, which I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with that, but it's to do with the digestive tract. And those are the side effects that I'm having of a bigger issue. So those small things are now under control, but we're trying to get to the main point of what's happening in my body to cause these issues. So I'm actually looking into getting this GI map done. I've been through the doctor's appointments. Our next step is probably going to be either a scope of the upper GI tract or a colonoscopy for the lower GI tract, to figure out if there's anything internally that's off. Because you want to cover all bases and make sure everything's healthy. So we're still in the process of figuring out what exactly it is, but there's something off. And I think that's just from doing this for so long. Our digestion takes a beating, whether it's in season or off season. And when you're as serious as most IFBB pros are, in season and off season, they become one. And we're dieting all year round. We're, putting it through the ringer. So I want to get everything checked out and make sure that it's healthy, because like you said, it affects everything. So I'm not getting optimal training. I'm not getting optimal rest. So yeah, it's a big issue for me right now.
Emily, I'm literally dealing with the same thing right now. Like, I'm colonoscopy is probably coming out. I just talked to T. I've been talking to T about this for the past 3 weeks. It sucks because you want to train so hard, but you're like I'm like, yeah, I'm dehydrated. I can't get enough fluids in me right now. And it's just a struggle. And I feel you, because it's so disheartening. Like, I'm taking days off where I don't want to take days off, but I don't have the energy to do it. And it's just like, man, like I just told T, I'm like, I hope I just have a parasite from one of my chickens and like they're just gonna, it'll be fine. But I feel you. And the positive, it's January. We can get it fixed, and then hopefully we'll have a proper off season. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be following you for that, because I mean, I feel you hard for that.
Yeah, and the tricky thing with digestion is there's so many variables that it could be. You know, we're playing it's almost like the guess who of your body. It's like, well, is this an issue or is that an issue or are you dealing with this? So, and then it's let's pull this out, let's add this, and every time you change something, you want to give it a little bit of time to see what the reaction is. So, you're looking at weeks I'm on months now where it's just like, what is wrong that we need to fix?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a game of trial and error, and it's very broad, so it requires a lot of patience too. That was the hardest thing for me, was having to pull back on training. No caffeine, no stimulants. It was very a different time. So
we all are in our 30s too. Like I think you and T and I just did a podcast about the importance hitting your 30s and gut health, and like when you're 20s and you're in your teens competing, we don't give a shit about it. Let's be honest. Like that's the least of our worries. But once we turn 30, it's like you feel your age. You do. You start having to worry about stuff you never had to, and it's like, damn it, I'm
and I
the
think
age
too,
now.
with social media being so prominent in the sport now, I'm sure athletes in the past dealt with these issues, but it wasn't on such a broad spectrum as it is now. You get on Instagram and you see so and so's doing the GI mapping, or so and so's dealing with this issue. So it's nice to know that it's not just you that's having these issues, it's the human body. Bodybuilding is a rough sport. And I think when we're younger, we don't think about that because we're Superman, we can do everything and anything. And as you're aging and doing this year after year after year, they add up. And unfortunately, it's checkup time. So you got to get everything checked out and make sure it's all working properly.
You turned pro in 2018?
Yes.
What show was that at?
That was at Junior USA. It's down in South Carolina.
Okay. And was that your first pro qualifier, or had you done pro qualifiers before?
That was my first pro qualifier. I had gotten with my current coach, Derek, that previous probably fall before the spring. It was in the spring. And that was our first season together. So we did the Pit Pro, which was a qualifier for nationals. And then 2 weeks later, we went to my first national show and ended up winning my pro card, which was totally unexpected. And that's kind of been the theme of my bodybuilding journey, where it's everything's happening rather quickly. So it's like, it's now time to step back and like catch up with everything. I've been competing pretty much every year. I finally took 2022 off, which was the first time in 5 years, I think, of doing any type of bodybuilding shows that I had actually taken off and didn't prep. Because it's been pretty much all I've known since I graduated college.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Emily and I was at the show that she went pro in. So like I got second, she won her pro card, and that's why I fangirl so much, because I was so proud of her. And then seeing where she progressed from when she started to now, it's just amazing. I tell T all the time, the conditioning that you bring to the Olympia stage, like fucking phenomenal. Let's just say that. Like, I mean, like that is like, that's the epitome of like, I'm like, damn, like you wow me every year, Emily, because I just see I see the way that you take your training and you take your diet the most serious. I think I compare you to Michaela Aycock. You guys are so serious off season, on season. I mean, like, I'm like, does this girl ever does she ever like have a cheat meal? Like her cheat meal is just like extra rice. I'm like, the fuck?
Yeah. It's definitely, like, I think this is the first year too that I'm realizing that like I can be pretty robotic when it comes to this stuff. And that's kind of one of my downfalls, is that I don't give myself grace. And now that, I've gone through so many seasons and so many shows, you realize like you actually do put your body through a beating. And for me to get to that level of conditioning, it's not genetically easy for me. It's not like it's a gift of mine. Like I have to work and diet hard to bring that conditioning. So it's a lot of wear and tear on your body over and over again. And I don't think people realize like every prep is just as hard, if not harder than the last. You want to think that it gets easier as you do this, and the longer you do it and more times you do it, prep gets easier, but they're all challenges within themselves. So each and every time you're putting yourself through that peaking process to get to stage lean, it's rough. And especially getting to the pro level, as you know, like it's a whole different world. you're put into this giant fish tank and you're a little guppy again, and you have to fight your way to the top. And I think that's where a disconnect comes for a lot of the athletes that want to do this sport, is that, yes, everyone wants their pro card, but when it comes time to use that pro card, it's a different ballgame. It's hard. You have to put a lot more emphasis on what you're doing outside of the gym than just your workouts and your, recording your training and, posting it all the time.
Yeah. Now, after you went pro at Junior USA's, I know you did a pro show. Did you have that in mind? Like when you stepped off stage, did you and Derek talk and be like, hey, because did you do it to get your feet wet and see where you were? Because I think you placed did you play as 11th for your first placing for a pro show?
Well, we actually took off. So we did Junior USA's and then shut it down, and we went into like an off season. And the following year, 2019, we did it was like a tour of shows. We did 3 shows back to back to back. And that was kind of the idea of getting my feet wet, of getting exposure, seeing what the pro stage takes and how far off I am from that. And we basically just wanted to get as much feedback as possible before we did a whole nother off season.
Okay. Yeah. So with the first 3 pro shows, where did you place with those?
So that was San Jose, Chicago, and Vancouver. And I was around the top 10 for most of them. My best placing was the 7th place at the Chicago Pro. But that was years ago, pre-COVID too, which changed a lot of stuff in the sport with the scheduling and everything. And it wasn't a bad placing. I wasn't, displeased with it. But of course, when you're, newly pro, you're like, I'm going to get in there and do some damage. And then you're like, holy shit, like these athletes have been doing this for a while and I have a lot of work to do. So it was a big eye opener. We did get a lot of feedback as far as directionally what way to take it with my training and nutrition and all that. So it was a good experience. I don't think I'd ever do 3 shows back to back to back ever again. Cause it's a lot to peak 3 weeks in a row. It's a lot. And not only that, but the traveling too. So it was fun, but if I look back at it, I wish we had taken it a little bit different my rookie season, but you can't change anything.
I mean, look at where you are now. So obviously it wasn't a bad thing. Look at where you are now.
Yeah.
Did you like how this year it was 2nd place at Pittsburgh in May, and then the week later you took 2nd at the New York Pro, and then you won the Omaha, what was it, 2 weeks later in first weekend in June. So, you did 3 shows this year. Was the goal just to like do one and shut it down if you won?
Yeah, so we actually planned on doing the Vancouver Isle show, which was in late April. And I think late February, early March, my coach was, he commented on one of our check-ins and said, I think we should really just use the pit as our opener. That being a hometown, crowd and you being fresh off of a year-long off season, coming back to the stage, I think it would be, a better welcoming. So we went with that. We went as, pit being the first show. Of course, you go in thinking, you want to win. That's the ultimate goal is to take the title and then move on to the Olympia. And it was funny because that week we get the call sheet for what athletes are going to be in it. And of course, Miss Olympia herself was in there. And you think, crap, there goes my chances. So for me, it was a big mental barrier of mine that I broke to go into that show thinking like, no, you know what, everything is fair game. I'm going to try my hardest and see what happens. And unfortunately it happened 2 weeks in a row. So it did extend, our season that we had really planned on. No one really wants to do that many shows back to back. It's hard. You'd rather just do 1 or 2 and shut it down. But unfortunately that wasn't how it went. So
how did it feel was it cool to stand next to Miss Olympia though? I mean, 1st and 2nd and be compared?
Oh yeah. It was, I think Pitt, I was a little bit more in shock, as it was happening and reflecting over the night at the end of the day, it was like, did that really happen? And then, going into New York, it was really exciting. It was probably the most like pumped I've been to get to a show and do the damn thing. Driving to the New York Pro across the state by myself, I had all that time in the car to kind of channel in and focus and That was probably the most excited I've ever been. Just to have that excitement rolling into a show. It's 2 weeks battling Miss Olympia. So it was definitely a fun experience to have that much hype going into a show.
Yeah, I think, this year, especially your contest season, you sort of broke the internet in a way with how conditioned you were all season. So, and that's, I mean, as a fan of bodybuilding, I have the utmost respect for conditioning. So it was cool to see from afar. With that, and especially being female, and Shannon and I have talked about this before, comes the hate from the online troll world. So how do you deal with that? How have you learned to block it out? Did it affect you when you were younger? Like, how do you deal with it? Because it's a part of it. Unfortunately, I wish we lived in a perfect world, but females especially get more hate than males.
Yeah. I think the part that frustrates me the most is when people don't realize how much just work that it takes to get to that point. A lot of the people on the internet think, you do steroids, so you look like that. You look ripped inside and out. And it's like, yes, we do use performance enhancing drugs. Because obviously you won't be able to look like that as a female naturally. It's not possible. So of course at this level, we are using PEDs in some way, but that's not the only thing causing us to look that way. To get inside out peeled conditioning, that is discipline, that is consistency, and that is honestly living in and out 24 hours a day bodybuilding. Because it's not just what you do in the gym. It's what you're doing from the moment your eyes wake up in the morning to the moment you're setting yourself up, for sleep at night. Every second of every day is tailored to that one goal of looking your best come show day. And I think that's what bothers me the most is everyone wants to just, say, oh, she does steroids and that's why she looks like it. And it's so much more than that.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, Emily, I've followed you for years and I've seen you called some people out when they, when they troll you. But I mean, you're very candid with all of your followers. You literally show us, and you're amazing with showing us your off season, your on season. I mean, your off season, I'm gonna be honest, your off season looks like your on season. You stay so conditioned, you get bigger, but so conditioned still. Like, I'm like, how does she just put on all this muscle? But it is so disheartening because people don't understand the process. And I know you personal train too on occasion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have more so in the past. Years ago, I used to go out of a gym, like one of the chain gyms and work as a trainer there.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone's been in and out of that job positioning over the years. You don't get treated right, you don't get paid right, and ultimately, it's really hard to stay passionate about the work when you're in that setting. So now I do more of like a freelancing type style, but
Okay. I ask because I get clients now because I still personal train at a powerhouse, and I'll get people that come in that want to train, but they go, I don't want to look like you. I don't want to be that muscular. And I'm just like, do you understand what it takes? Like, it's not like we can do this in 3 sessions and you're going to grow muscle. So I don't know if you ever get stuff like that, but I'm almost get offended. I'm like, you think it's that easy to get that muscular? And that is where the misconception comes in, because people, like you said, people just think you take stuff and you train a little bit and you get buff. And it's I mean, you've been doing this for over 5 years. I've been in the sport for a decade. T's been in the sport for a decade. So it takes a lot of time. And, kind of turning gears and going back into like the performance enhancing, that is a big decision as us females make. And was that when you made that decision, like, did you know you were going to, or did you kind of take your time and decide, like, how did you kind of make that decision knowing you had to do that?
Yeah. So I dabbled a little bit with my previous coach. So that was the initial starting of it. And I want to say I was maybe 24 at the time of like, just starting your first, compound or your first cycle. Yep. And at that point I figured this is, what I want to do. This is what I want my body to look like. So obviously I'm going to do what I need to do to be competitive at that level. And about the side effects. And when you're young and 20, you're like, that's so far off. I'm not going to worry about it. And like you said, the longer you do this, you start to realize that it is a very serious topic, and you need to be careful of what you're putting in your body, how much you're putting in your body, and for how long you're putting it in your body. And now that I've done this for years, you start to really do know that like the side effects stack up and they start, progressing over time. So it is something that you need to take as a big decision and make sure that you want to do this for the right reasons.
Now, have you taken a compound where like some competitors, I mean, we all have different side effects. They respond differently to the compound. Has there been a compound that you had tried and you're like, nope, I can't do this. There's side effects where I mean, I don't know the relationship you have with your coach, but I mean, I set boundaries, be like, hey, I'm never taking this. I don't know if you're like that, or have you had experience where you've taken something, you're like, I can't do this anymore. It's too bad.
Yeah. I don't think any, steroids themselves or compounds have caused any major issues. Obviously like water retention is one that isn't fun. But it's just, some drugs will stack up some water on you and some don't. So that's more of like a body image issue with me, especially, is where I'll get a little bit more self-conscious, especially in the off season when you're softer as it is. But there was a aldactone, which was something we had to use going into the Olympia in 2021. I had injured myself a month out, and unfortunately we couldn't push cardio the way we needed to. So we actually ran aldactone going into that show, and that is probably the worst feeling I've had from a drug. It's typically used to dry you out or to take the water off of you. And it's a lot rougher than any of the other options that we've used going into shows. You just feel depleted upon depleted, super dry, like achy. Your joints have dried out that much that it hurts to move. And I just remember feeling so lifeless and just like all of my muscle had gone. And you have to run that one for several days leading into the show. So it was a little bit longer of having to deal with that feeling. And I told my coach, like, I hope we never have to run that again, because it was rough. It was rough.
No, and it's interesting you say that, because I use aldactone for my water pulling protocol pretty much because it responds very well to me. So it's interesting, and this is why we do these conversations, because what works for you or what works for me won't work for you, and that's why it's so different when people are talking about this online, because you can't follow someone else's protocol because everyone's bodies respond differently. So that's my biggest pet peeve is people kind of will say, oh, I'm taking this and this, and someone tries to follow it. I'm like, you can't. You absolutely can't, because everyone has completely different genetic makeup, so they're going to respond differently. So that's interesting.
Yes. And that goes with anything. I mean, women, I know we kind of stick to certain compounds. I know guys have a lot more options when it comes to those things. But for me, it's, we've tried a lot of things. And dosage wise, we don't use astronomical numbers. We use enough to get the result that we want from that drug. But some of them, you get maybe a little bit more personality change or shift. You might feel a little bit more agitated, or I know for a lot of people, sex drive is a big one. So either you get a big increase or you get a decrease, sadly. So those things, messing with your hormones in any way, you're going to get some kind of reaction. And like you said, every compound works differently in every human body. So, what side effects I get, you might never get from a certain drug, like you said.
Yeah. Now, and now I know too, like going back, like your parents are pretty supportive of your lifestyle. It seems like you post about your parents a lot too. Now, did you have to have that conversation with them when you decided to kind of start into the PEDs, or like how did their reaction go with that?
It's kind of funny because it's, I don't want to say a taboo subject, but when I got into bodybuilding, I was still living under my parents' roof. So, my mom's been a nurse all of her life. So she knows a little bit of the health systems and what these, drugs will do to your body over time. So she was a little bit more, worried or, judgmental. I remember in the early years of me competing, obviously we get things in the mail, and she would, be like, I don't want to see this anymore. Yeah, this is the last one. And over time, I think she realized that this was something I wanted to pursue quite seriously. That I wasn't just doing it for fun or for a hobby. I really wanted to put a lot of effort into it. So over time, my mom especially has come to be a little bit more understanding. Does she like it? No. I'm sure she would rather me not, be doing any sorts of bodybuilding drugs. But now I've made sure that I'm taking care of my health, making sure everything's doing okay. This year I'm really keeping up with a lot of the PCP appointments to check everything, to get my blood tested, to see where my levels are at, see if my thyroid's working properly. So I'm being a little bit more preventative, and I think she is really coming into that and understanding that, like, okay, she's doing them, I don't like it, but she's being responsible.
Now, like, do you come like after your prep season? Like, obviously, sometimes in our off season, but especially they're long, we do have to take some drugs to keep everything going. Do you have a time where you're off everything? And do you get your menstrual cycle back on occasion, or are you just kind of done with that?
So we've usually we've rolled right into an off season. So we would do maybe like an 8 to 10 week health phase. And we would come down to very minimal doses and come off all of the prep drugs. So most of the orals would be out. And we're basically just taking, enough, like you said, to keep everything going, to keep everything rolling. This time post-season, it's a little bit different with all of the health issues that I've been having and dealing with. We've actually kept my hormones low, my lowest dosage in probably 2 years, and for the longest now. So we've gone on about 3 months here with very low minimal doses of everything. So to feel the shift in my hormones at first was pretty strong. You get a lot of mood swings, energy levels were really low, depression, that kind of a feeling, just having such low numbers in your body. And I wasn't aware of it. I was talking to my coach and I'm saying, like, I don't know why I just feel so crappy. And he's like, Emily, it's your hormones. And that took time. I'm feeling better now. We're still on the low doses of everything, but I think everything's starting to level out a little bit. And once we obviously start another cycle, another push cycle, I'll probably feel more like myself. But it can be very, very powerful shifts in your body.
Now, how has your training been affected with how you're feeling right now? Are you having to kind of almost do like deloads, or how are you shifting that?
Yeah, it's kind of touch and go. If I have a good day and everything's feeling good, I'll push a little bit. We're still, at least myself, I'm keeping very lenient as far as loads go. So I haven't been doing anything really heavy. I haven't been doing any, spinal loading exercises, just to kind of give everything a break. So it's been a lot watered down, according to me, in my book. But it's nice to kind of go back to the basics and clean everything up, clean my form up, making sure I'm connecting really well. And not only that, but just some mental health, not going in there and thinking it's do or die every single day. Going in and just feeling my body again, feeling good, making sure everything's moving properly and I'm nice and loose. So it's a different shift. I've had to learn to accept it a little bit. I fought it for a while there because you want to go in and train hard and move heavy weight. And, I just couldn't do that right now. So, rather than to risk injury or to risk prolonging this little health phase I've had to take, you pull back because it's what you have to do.
And I will say that just comes with maturation from the sport. T always preaches that, like, it's the older you get, the more we learn, like, it's okay to not everything go do or die. It's one of those, or we have to do, there's days where you're going to have a half-ass workout. Like, it sucks, but like, you can't give it your all. Like, I mean, right now with my GI issues, I have great days and there's days where I'm like, I'm so dehydrated, I cannot lift for more than 20 minutes. And it sucks, but it's one of those things that we have to pull back so we're not prolonging our health, issues. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I wanted to, because you're very, you talk about this a lot in social media. Tommy and I talk about recovery all the time. You preach recovery. I mean, you foam roll all the time. You're one of those. I mean, like, you can do the splits right now, can't you? Like, your flexibility, like, I mean, that's impressive. I mean, I told T I've been doing some yoga and it's humbling as fuck because I can't, my flexibility sucks. So talk to us a little bit about like your recovery and like, what was your background? Like, were you in gymnastics before? Like, where are you getting this flexibility from with the amount of muscle you have?
Yeah, so I was actually a dancer like my entire life. My sister was in dance when I was born. My mom put me right in dance classes. So from the second I was like 3 years old, I've been dancing. And I was one of those kids that were like super Gumby. So I could like fold myself in half and put my leg behind my head and all these like crazy stuff. So, rather than doing all these flips in the house and breaking stuff, my parents finally let me do gymnastics. So I did a little bit of gymnastics. Then I got into track and field. And that's kind of where like the sports in me took off. So it was less artistic and more like jock mode. And I think getting into bodybuilding and like you said, like putting on muscle on my body, it's weird to feel myself losing that flexibility. There's been times in the past couple of years where you don't stretch as much, you get a little behind, and obviously with off season we're heavier, so it's harder to be flexible and mobile and everything. So I go in and out, but I try to keep up with it. Most of the time I don't like when I don't feel limber. So if my joints, like especially right now, my ankles are really bad. So I'm learning that like mobility, not just flexibility, is also important because they're completely different. Like I can do splits all day and night, but if I don't have shoulder mobility, I'm not well rounded. I'm not healthy. So it's learning to know where to put your focus. Flexibility for me, naturally, it just comes with that background. The mobility is where I really have to do a lot of the work.
How has that flexibility helped with training as far as range of motion and the from the training aspect?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the training actually makes it worse. Like going into the Olympia, I had to tailor my legs a little bit because they were too dominant. They were too powerful. So we wanted to bring the adductors down. We wanted to bring the quad sweep a little bit down to kind of soften them. So we changed my training and actually moved a lot of my stances to a narrower or a neutral stance and not so much wider. So I wasn't getting as much range of motion in my hips. So coming off of the prep for the Olympia, I realized that my hip mobility and flexibility there wasn't quite what it was. So for me, I have to keep up with it because the training actually starts to eat away at that natural flexibility that I do have.
So in that actually, because I know you've gotten a lot of flack online about what's women's physique and what's women's bodybuilding. I think I've seen the most energy pointed towards you of like she's too big for physique. But there's actually the whole women's physique division kind of gets it right now because it's like always walking a fine line and the judges are always saying get bigger and then they pull everybody back. Have you had any feedback that's told you that you have to go to female bodybuilding ever or that you're close?
Yeah, so after reaching out to the judges after the Olympia, a lot of the feedback, when you ask them, should I move up? That's a very personal question. I think I was expecting them to say, yes, we want you to move up. It's a better fit. But after discussing with my coach, that their responses were a lot of open-ended, saying that, if that's what you feel, or, if that's the route you would take, I think you do really well. So it was more of those answers, not clear cut. So after talking with my coach, you understand that moving up from physique to bodybuilding with gear protocols, with training protocols, with food protocols, it's all a little bit more extreme to build to add, the size and density that you need. So it is a personal decision. It's something that I haven't quite come to a clear decision myself. Would I love to move up? Yeah, I think it would be awesome. I think the women's bodybuilding division right now is blossoming. There's so much talent, and it's progressed and flourished so much further than it has over the couple years that we weren't seeing it at the Olympia. But it's also a lot to take on. Gear protocols, you're running a lot more and a lot for extended periods of time too. Food protocols, obviously you're gonna have to eat more. It's a lot, grocery bills are high, and it's so I'm dabbling with the idea of it. There's no definite decision yet. I think I'm just gonna bodybuild and wherever it takes me, it takes me. Next time I go to cut down.
No, that's a fair, that's a fair statement. I mean, that was when T was saying how you get a lot of flack. Like that's the biggest thing. I even remember like Michaela Aycock defending you in one of the posts because people like, this is not right. She's like, the judges will literally tell you if you're not right for you to just say, no, you need to move up. So if they're not giving you a fine line, why? If you love physique, I mean, that's what I know you for is physique. I mean, you'll get known for bodybuilding for sure if you moved up to this thing. Did you ever think about just doing a crossover at one of the pro shows just to try it, to see where you're
Yeah.
placed?
Yeah. So I kind of wished that my body didn't like go into the tanker as it is now. Like if I was healthier, I think it would have been fun to see if I could have jumped into a women's bodybuilding show at some point this year, just to see and get that feedback. But then it's like you're putting yourself through a whole nother competition season just to find out. So I think what my ultimate like personal decision will be is I'm gonna build a body that I feel comfortable with and that I feel proud in, and that I'm, happy with. Because obviously, like we all get into this because we love training, right? We love the gym. And if I have to really change the way I'm training and what I'm doing every day in and out, I'm not gonna be happy. So for me, I would say my priority is to make sure that I'm enjoying my training, and if it leads me to bodybuilding, great. If I stay in women's physique and I'm still on that borderline, and I take a hit placing wise, then I'll have to come to terms with that as well. But for me, it's more about what I feel happy with and the way I want my body to be.
Which is how it should be. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't chase a carrot that isn't going to fulfill you. So is there a chance that since you are taking the whole year off, and I don't know how long this phase you're in or how extensive the gut stuff will last for you, is there a chance that could lead you to be able to downsize and then kind of build up from there, and if you wanted to stay women's physique?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me are my legs.
Right.
And personally, I don't like the way I look with smaller legs. Going into the Olympia, I didn't feel like me. I would look in the mirror and it would almost be like, I don't like this. I don't like the way I looked. And in prep, like that's when you look the coolest, like that's why we become so infatuated with mirrors, because we're just like, wow, I've worked and I like the way I look. And I didn't have that feeling going into the Olympia. So I wouldn't be happy downsizing. And when I do this and when I, compete, I like to go 1,000 miles an hour as hard as I can, doing everything, to its completion. So I just don't think I would feel as fulfilled with women's physique staying there. So I think, with some time off, and we're changing my training to tailor a little bit more upper body development. I think women's bodybuilding is definitely gonna be in my future. It's just a matter of when it will be.
You heard it here. Cool. I mean, you can do great in either. I mean, you took second twice and won a show. How did you feel about the Olympia package? I know you were kind of hurt going into it and you had to change up your training a bit based off of feedback, but how did you feel about the package looking back now?
Yeah, I think when all was said and done, when I was able to look at the comparisons and some video stage footage, I was happy with it. I think we brought what I could in the time that we had. Going off of a season in the spring and then going right into another prep. You're not fresh. Your body's fighting everything a little bit more. It was a rough prep. I'm not gonna lie. I really had to push towards the end because my body was it was not responding like it usually does. It was tired. And a lot of the other women at that level, are coming fresh from being off for an entire year. So it's hard to look at yourself next to them and think, oh, I could have been so much better if I was fresh. But I was still happy with what we brought. I think our conditioning was right on track with what I usually bring to shows. Like I said, I wish that I had the same pop that I did in the spring, but with the timelines, it just wasn't possible. So it wasn't my best, but it also wasn't my worst. So I'm happy with it. I placed top 10 in the world. Who can be upset with that?
Right.
But I definitely want to have a better showing in the future. Hopefully, if I can get back there.
I've talked with
Yeah.
Michaela about this, but the structure of the show schedule each year, especially since COVID, because they've been moving the Olympia back like 4 to 6 weeks each year. Because I think ultimately they're trying to get it back to that September timeline where it always was, but it keeps shortening the amount of time that you have to make improvements, year to year. And then in your case, it's like if you compete in the spring, you're dieted all through the winter to get ready for those shows. And then you don't really get any time to like chill and throttle down, because by the time you do that, you have to get ready for the Olympia. So it has led to a lot of people having, longer seasons and longer times on, both male and female. So I wonder if that has contributed to a lot of people's, we're seeing a lot of gut health stuff pop up as, every day I see somebody new who's getting a GI map and going through some of the stuff I just did. So it's interesting when you look at it like that.
Yeah, and I think too, like, and within the past couple of weeks, I keep seeing a lot of athletes dropping out of the Arnolds, and it's like, right there, that's proof that I just feel like the industry, the timeline, the scheduling of everything, it expects athletes to just be able to compete year round, or at least, every couple months, which just it's not healthy. And an already sport that's not the healthiest, to ask you to keep your body kind of at that high of an output for that long, it's just going to lead to disasters. And look at how many injuries we've had, look at how many, like you said, gut health issues that we've had pop up of athletes out in social media, willing to share their stories. And I think, with the way it is, and if it keeps up like this, I think it's just going to keep increasing, unfortunately. And it's sad to see, athletes that enjoy doing this, and having their bodies just fight so much because we ask so much of it.
I do think, and I'm glad that you were bringing up the timeline. It is interesting because way back when, I think in like 2014, 2015, like the early 2010 plus, the schedule was a lot easier. They usually, wasn't it usually like the last pro shows and amateur shows were like November, like mid in November, and then December, and I think even January was like there were no shows. And they used to have that. And correct me if I'm wrong, maybe in the Europe they did, but there were none in the US. And then they need to go back to that, because look at this past December was Olympia, Nationals. I think there was another, I don't know, there might have been a couple of local shows, but I always tell people, I'm like, I don't know why they did that. I think it's horrendous. They do it all the way till now, almost to the end of December. And then right away, now we have shows already coming in like February now. I'm just like, when do we get a break?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially too, like, I've always been an athlete that wants to improve every time you step on stage. And I feel like when you're expected to compete like biannually like that, like spring and winter time, you never give yourself enough time to really improve. And in a sport that takes time to really develop everything, this like quick instant gratification that everyone expects from bodybuilding, it's like things don't happen overnight. They don't happen in a couple months. For a true off season to be effective, it's like you want at least like 8, 9, 10, 12 months, longer than that, to really be, effective. And with the way the scheduling works, it's like having that Olympia in the winter and then the Arnold in the spring. It's just like, all these pros are kind of thinking of competing in 2 seasons all year round, and you just can't do that.
Yeah, it's tricky because there's the business side of things always. Like the IFBB is a business. They have a certain monetary number they need to make that business function. Supplement companies and, companies that sponsor the athletes, there's probably pressure there to, if an athlete's saying, well, I'm going to take the entire year off and I'm going to compete every 18 months, there's, because in prep is when everybody gets more reach on Instagram. Everybody gets, more buzz around them. If you're getting shout outs and you're in the thick of it. No one cares that you're 9 months deep in an off season making improvements, which is what you should be doing, but no one cares about it because it's not shiny and there's nothing exciting about it. So it's like an oxymoron. It's very like a catch-22. Like you want better physiques on stage, but you're cutting down the time that the physiques actually get time to get better.
Yeah, that's why I love Emily posts all that
conditioning.
stuff. Yeah, that's why I love when Emily posts all her off season. I mean, you literally, God, there was one post you always say, feel like a water buffalo, because it's just like your off season, and I'm just like, but I mean, like you're so transparent with everyone. I think that's the best, is you show even when you have your smaller off seasons, like you still show like, this is what I look like, this is what's going on. And that's what I admire so much about you is you're very open, like how you're feeling mentally, how you're feeling physically. Like, hey, I'm not shredded all year round. I mean, yes, you are, Emily. You really are shredded all year round. You're just bigly shredded, but you are.
Yeah. Well, I think it's for me when I got started in the sport, I would go into an off season and think, I'm looking so bad, and why does nobody else look like me? Am I doing things right? But I'm following my protocol. Is that something off? Is it not working? And it's mainly because a lot of athletes that I looked up to really only showed their season content. The times when they're leaning down or they're getting ready for a show, and they don't show all sides of things. And I think it's important too to tell other athletes that, like, I have troubles. I have things that I struggle with too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. And, everyone wants to put their best highlights up on Instagram. And it's not how it is. It's not realistic. If you're a true bodybuilder, you're going to have ebbs and flows of good times and bad times. And it might seem like, I'm doing everything right all of the time, but there have been times throughout my career of doing this that I've been down, I've been body conscious, I've struggled with mental things, mental health. We're all human, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind of bodybuilders. We all struggle.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because the thing is, like, Tommy, I know you posted on your off season, and men and women in their off season are so different. Men can really put on a little bit of weight and look really good. And I think, like, for me, it's like when I post my off season, I mean, I'll get comments and be like, whoa, like you get fat sometimes, like you're not on your off. Like, I don't think people understand that. And because we're so vulnerable as women, and let's be honest, we're a little bit more emotional, a little bit more empathetic. Like, it's almost like we're showcasing our vulnerability, and like, yeah, we put that out there. So we have to just kind of take what people say. And it's not always the nicest. Like, it's not. And I think that's the biggest thing, though, is people have to understand, like, this is not a sustainable, like, on stage, it is not sustainable. Like, you can't hold that look. You can't. You have to get thick again. Like, and I think that's the hardest thing, is there's even competitors that have talked about, like, oh, I tried to sustain my prep diet and now I'm in the hospital, or now I'm losing muscle. And it's really important to show that transparency. Like, hey, we have to put on body fat after. Like, it's not. And another misconception, I'm sure that you both have said this, people who are not even part of the bodybuilding community be like, so what do you guys do on stage? You lift weights? Is it about like who can lift and flex? I'm like, no, like we're literally like hours from death. Like, I was like, we're weak as fuck. Like, we're just trying to like get through it.
Yeah, it's a beauty pageant, the final product, but the process is what you fall in love with, and then your habits that you've created that get you to a certain level are what you fall back on, no matter how you feel. And that's what I think the biggest thing that I try to convey to younger people who I coach is you can't ride a high too long, and you can't ride a low too long. You just got to let it go. You just got to, turn the page, start the next day. At the end of the day, train, get your meals into your cardio, and get good sleep. Stack those habits and do them for months into years. And, you'll go through every possible emotional roller coaster that you could think of along that path. But if you just stick to doing what that's what I've found in talking to all the bodybuilders and talking to you, Emily, is that everybody just like kind of blocks out how they feel at a certain point, and they just do what they know they need to do, because the thought of not doing it will just make them feel worse.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that topic up, because it's one I've been struggling with recently. For me, I can turn into quite the machine of just, getting it done, waking up, go through the motions, get the checklist done, and move on. And I don't think I really take into account, how I'm feeling, how my body feels, listening to my body. And it's burned me in the past. I'm able to kind of deal with a lot of shit, or a lot of like just feeling crappy, and still punching out and being productive. And over time, you start to realize that it might not be the healthiest to keep doing that, because you're now suppressing a lot of things that your body stacks up. And over time, it's going to, explode and be a bigger issue than it could have been if you just handled it when it started. So for me, that's something I'm starting to take into account, that like, if I'm feeling a certain way, if my training is suffering, don't just push through. Really listen to what your body's telling you. And sometimes it might be trying to shout something at you that you're just too stubborn to listen to.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing to continue to tame if you're someone who doesn't have any issues with adherence, and it's like you train really hard, is knowing when it's okay to pull it back, or when it's okay to even convey it to a coach. Because I've been bloated for 6 years straight before I fixed my gut. And I just assumed that was how I had to feel to put on the size I need to grow. So I just normalized it. Like, I'm not going to tell a coach about it because I don't want to complain. But, after not feeling bloated for 2 months, because now I fixed my gut, I'm like, man, I should have probably maybe mentioned it along the way at some point, but it's just a mindset thing.
I literally just go on, Emily, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go for it.
So I literally just had a phone call before this podcast with my coach, just talking, we've been talking quite a lot about my GI issues, but it is funny because I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't tell you this earlier. I just didn't realize the severity of this, until it's been going on for some time. He goes, Shannon, he's like, you're a bodybuilder. He's like, you guys all suppress it because you just take it and you just don't know, it's so true. Like, we don't know when it's time to be like, okay, this is like out of coach's hands, my hands, like, you have to have somebody else. But it is true. Like, I think it takes bodybuilders a lot longer to be like, oh shoot, like, this probably isn't part of like my protocol. This is nothing that I'm doing, my protocol is affecting. It's something else. Like, and it's so true, because we people that, like, it's just comes with maturation, like learning, like, oh wow, this is really off, and it's not from my food or my drugs. It's something different. And I mean, it took me a while. Like, I feel now, like, I'm really aware. I'm like, wow, I'm not feeling myself. But back in the day, oh gosh, I'd be like, no, I'm just going to train. And then I would probably be sick for 4 days. But it's part of, getting older and maturing with the sport. And I think that's the hardest thing for younger competitors and new people in the sport, is finding those little like nuances that your body's like telling you, but you have to listen. Because when you're first in the sport, you're just giving it all. You're just pushing through the pain. And it's that mindset, like, whatever it takes. And you are a seasoned pro, I'm an upcoming pro, Tommy's been in this a long time. Like, it's taken us a long time to just kind of develop those habits of like, okay, like, this is totally not normal. Okay. Like, for me, like, I've had gut health issues now for 2 months. Like, after about 6 weeks, I'm like, oh, this is probably need to get looked at. So, just for even when anyone listening that's up and coming, like, you got to kind of like listen to that little voice in the back of your head, like, hey, is this really normal? Or, if you're unsure, just ask your coach and they'll tell you. Be like, yeah, if they're a good coach, will say, go to the doctor, get it checked out. I can't do it. I think the biggest thing for a coach, and the most admirable thing, is when a coach says, I don't know, I cannot help you with this, we have to get somebody else. That is the most admirable thing a coach can do, instead of saying, hey, let me try to fix this, but not knowing what to do with it.
Yes. And I think too, like, the reaction that your coach has when you might be going through some health issues is so important to pay attention to. Luckily I've been with my coach for a long time. He and I have a really good relationship. This is the first time that I've really dealt with an issue like this for as long as I have, and needing to pull back as much as we have. So for me to be able to reach out and say, like, this is what we're going through, I'm still not feeling right, something's still off. We actually got to a point a couple of weeks ago where we did a check-in, and he said, okay, here we go. I want you to ramp this up. We're going to go up to this dose. We're going to push, food's increasing this. And I said, wait, I'm still having issues and I don't feel like myself. I don't want to push my body if it's not 100%. That was the whole point of this health phase. So for me to feel comfortable enough to tell him, wait, and for his reaction to be, okay, no, I'm listening to you. We're not right. Let's hold off. Let's figure everything out. If your coach is pressuring you and saying like, no, we need to push, we don't have the time for this, something isn't right there. And you need to make sure you have a coach that has your, health in mind. I know we all like to win. I know we all like to do well. But at the end of the day, you don't want bodybuilding to have long-term effects or irreversible effects on yourself. So.
Yeah, it's patience. I mean, it's playing the game of chess and not trying to play checkers. Like, I battle with that thought every day, because I'm coming back from the gut health stuff, and every session I'm stronger, I'm getting food down, weight's going back up, and it's like, well, maybe I could do a show at the end of the year. And it's like, nope, you made a plan. It's next year, it's the whole year off. So there's always that little voice that's going to try to like sway you out of what you decided to do. And I'm sure you deal with it too. Like, if you feel good in the gym on a day, you're supposed to be pulling back. You just want to, full on send it, load the bar up and see how it goes.
Yeah. And like you said, it's definitely a chess game. It's so easy to want to progress like linearly. and just keep improving. But that's not how bodybuilding is. Sometimes you have to take a step backwards to take two forwards. And it's hard. It's hard to tell yourself, okay, be patient now. It'll get better. And then, your body will take off and it'll improve way more than you thought it would. So that's where I struggle too, is knowing when to be patient and being like, okay, now is not the time. Now is a recovery or a rest or a pause moment before we push for any improvement.
Yeah. And earlier you talked about not feeling like yourself because you're pulling back from everything. That's exactly how I felt, because I spent 12 weeks on like true TRT, and it was the lowest I'd been in 8 years. And it was a shock. And it wasn't that anything was wrong. I just wasn't supercharged with hormones for the first time in 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like, this is what it's like to be, a normal male at 32. So I think it was like a culture shock. And then, the first week you're back on and you're able to train hard. Same thing. I just was like, wow, I feel more like myself.
Yeah. And I think we realized too,
that's what I have to do to feel like myself, but that's a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, we forget what it feels like not to be on of hormones or anything like that. I was talking to my coach and I'm like, I feel like I look like crap. My physique's gone down the hill and everything's off. And he's like, you're really not. Like, you're leaner than you were last off season. Your body's in a good place. You're going to be fresh when we do add in more hormones, and your body's going to respond and everything. He's like, you're just not a very enhanced look right now. And that was a clicker in my mind to say, okay, you're right. Like, I'm not looking the way I expect myself to, because we're not doing what we usually do to get that look.
Right.
And it's not that I'm doing anything off. I'm not messing up the program. It's just, it's not the program right now. And I think we forget that too, is like, we get so used to everything feeling that enhanced of being on of hormones, the way our training feels, the way our recovery feels. And when you take those out, it's like, ooh, I don't feel like Superman anymore. And we don't like that. We're not used to that anymore. So it is hard. I can totally relate with you. Going into the gym and not being able to pull certain numbers that I usually do, or move certain weights that I usually do. I'm like, wow, I've lost so much strength. And it's like, no, because I'm pulling back, I'm letting everything recover. I'm not pushing for strength right now. It's not, it's not what my body is aiming for. So why can't I be mad at it for not performing the way? So
yeah, I will say, I think that period of time did allow me to like get in tune with recovery again, because if you're on a cycle, and you have the mindset to, there's nothing you can't recover from. It might not be that your body might be telling you things along the way, but you're mentally overriding it. And I can definitely do that, when I have a cycle and I'm like fixated on a timeline or a goal. So I was forced to like tap into actual, like, giving myself a recovery score every day. How do my joints feel? Do I have brain fog? How's my sleep? Like, so I think that there's things you can take of value from being forced to pull back. You can make, a positive out of a negative, but again, it's all that mental chess game.
Yeah. And that's why I think that, mental side of this all is so important and so key to not only train your body, but to train your mind, and to be able to go through these ebbs and flows and not letting yourself mentally break down. I'm sure you guys can relate, like going through extended periods of time where you're trying to figure out what's going wrong with your body. The longer it goes on, it's easier to lose hope and to think, why am I still doing this? Why am I still training? I'm not training the way I should to, make the results. I'm not eating the way I should to make the results. So why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why don't I just stay home and chill on the couch and not go train, because I really don't want to. And that's where the discipline comes in, and knowing that, like, this is a lifestyle, and you might not feel optimal every single day. You might not feel 10 out of 10, but if you go in there and give some effort and get something out of the day, then sitting on the couch and feeling bad for yourself, then that's a win. And I think that's so important to tell all other athletes that, like, if you get past that mental barrier and the negativity doesn't break you, that's winning. Even if you're not hitting PRs in the gym, or smashing a free meal on top of your 5 regular meals because you're just getting so big, you're eating so much food. It's like, you need to appreciate what your body can do, because at the end of the day, this is a privilege, living this way and choosing to train and to work out, because we all have able bodies. Like, that's a blessing. So it's so easy to become almost like bratty about it and be like, oh, I'm not hitting PRs in the gym, so I suck. And why am I doing this? But it's all, at the end of the day, it's all your mindset. It's all the focus that you put on.
Did you start, so based off talking to you, it seems like you're an extreme person. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah. So did you start bodybuilding extreme, or has the level of extreme amplified the further you've gone?
I've started extreme and I've only gotten more extreme. When I first started, it was one of the things where it was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it all out. I'm going to give it my all and not have any regrets for it. And I feel like the longer I do this, the more almost like I call myself OCD all the time, but it is true. The more like obsessive I am about hitting certain meals at certain times of the day and getting my training in at this time and making sure everything's according to plan and I have the weights I need and the machines I need. And I almost got so uptight about that when I realized that it's more about being able to kind of be lenient as far as like, yes, I'm checking off the boxes, I'm getting everything done I need to. It might not be perfect, but we're still getting there. And over time, consistency outweighs perfection in my eyes, or at least that's what I'm trying to tell myself. So every day does not need to be 100% perfect, because that's when my anxiety spikes and I'm worried about everything. And it's just not healthy for me. It doesn't become fun anymore. So moving forward, I have to realize that if I'm checking the boxes and I'm getting everything done the way I need to, that is enough. Being consistent is enough. Showing up is enough. And giving my 100% of that day is enough.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. We're just over an hour. Shannon, do you have anything else?
Okay, we won't make this a super long topic, but I am really interested, Emily. Can you run through, obviously right now you're going through some health issues, so your training's kind of taken, you have had to deload a little bit. What does your normal training look like? Do you do like push pull? Do you do more like splits? Like, I'm always interested to see like your mindset and how you and your coach have kind of developed your protocol, and like what's your favorite body part to train? Just talk to us about like your gym environment and your training.
Yeah. So for probably a little over 2 years, we were doing a 3-on, 1-off rotation. So it would be 3 training days, a rest day, 3 training days. And that's majority of the time. Of course, we'd have deloads in there or rest periods in there. But for the majority of my training, that would be the setup. We were doing a 6-day split. So I would actually have one all leg day. We'd have a secondary where I would touch legs, and it would be mainly delts and shoulders, delts and arms mixed in there. I would have usually 2 back days. I would do a little bit of chest on those days, and then we'd have an arm day and then a delt and arm day. So that would be my 6-day rotation. We did that all the way through until the Olympia. Just recently, talking to my coach and giving him a little bit of feedback, we switched to a 2-on, 1-off. So that's giving me a little bit more rest, not only just for recovery, but also just realizing how much of output I would do. Getting to that 3rd day, I wasn't feeling as fresh as I typically would. So I think switching that has made a world of a difference. We're still doing a lot of the same setup. So we still have a leg day, now just 1 leg day only. We're doing 2 back days. I actually got a chest day back, which is exciting. So to have that on a separate day and to be able to give a little bit more attention to it is super exciting. I can't wait to see what that does over time. And then we'll also have an arm day. So a little bit more tailored to what we need to improve. We're pulling out that extra volume in leg training to see if we can get my upper body to catch up a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over, doing this for months moving forward.
So have you started it yet, or you got to wait till your gut health kind of?
Yeah. So I've started at least training that way. Now our workouts aren't 100% set in stone. So like we said, I go in there. If I feel good, I'll do movements that I'm connecting with well. I'll push a little bit, maybe turn up the intensity a little bit. If I'm not feeling so great, then I go in and do what I can, and making sure that I'm connecting still through the movement pretty well. But with my personality the way it is, my coach was like, I don't want to put you on a set schedule because you'll probably push when you shouldn't be pushing. Just that's just the way I am. So it's easier not having almost like a logbook in my head to say like, okay, I did this last week, so I need to get this week. So it's better now as I'm still kind of recovering everything, and not being as like stubborn.
No, that's I'm just always fascinated because I think I told you, like, I mean, like, I've followed you. I think your physique is amazing. It just the progress you have made from 2018 to now. It's like you ate yourself. Like you ate yourself just to put on the amount of muscle that you put on, and then the conditioning. I will say, like, if you haven't looked for her stage photos of, you have to. Her conditioning is like it's jaw dropping. Like, I mean, like I wouldn't even want to be an Olympia judge. And it's interesting because like you bring such a very, I mean, you bring a very awesome package every year, but I know your physique from the back immediately, just your conditioning. And it's amazing to see you on stage, you know, with Natalia and Sarah and Brooke Walker and all these athletes, because you guys have all so different physiques. You really do. And it's one of those things where it's just like, wow, like I don't even why do you want to judge these? Because it's just like you guys all are such great, like you are the epitome of women's physique, but so is Brooke and so is Sarah. And it's crazy how different your physiques are, but how amazing each of you can carry that. So I always say that. I'm always just like, oh my gosh, like the level of conditioning that I have to get to at the pro level. I'm like, oh gosh. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, conditioning is definitely it's one of my stronger points. I think I'm good at suffering for some reason. But yeah, it's not easy, I'll tell you that much. Conditioning is definitely one of those aspects of the sport where it's just like it's a visual representation of just how much you're willing to put yourself through. Because you can't cheat it. You know, you have to get there the hard way.
well, and I can say this, I will always remember this. So I'm telling you guys, like she's always had amazing conditioning because when she went pro, she had this purple suit on her stage and her back was amazing, but she had back veins. And I literally remember like, how the fuck do you get back veins in those areas? Like it was like, and this is when she was an amateur going pro. I literally remember your back because you had that V taper and you have this big vein going through, and I go, I didn't even know a vein ran right there. Like I was just like, wow. So I knew like from them that condition you brought even an amateur to, you know, to a pro qualifier to your pro stage. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, the only other level of conditioning that I've seen is Michaela Aycock has amazing conditioning as well. You guys have very similar. And then when Jill Blondin used to compete, I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she had she had a very gnarly, like she was, you know, I wish she competed again. Her physique is amazing, but
Yes,
very
I
similar. Like
remember
you
she was
three.
one of my like idols.
Yeah.
I saw her pictures of her. You know, we all do those like prep pictures where you're like 2 days out from stage and you take the picture and you're like crazy shredded. I remember
Yeah.
looking at her and being like, that is goals. That is
Yeah.
yeah, she's a
Yeah.
huge inspiration for me.
Yeah.
Those
Tommy, were
those
you
one.
around? Because we were both she was at Royal Gym a couple times when you and I were training there too. And that was when I mean, in person, it's just gnarly too.
Yeah,
Remember
yeah.
that?
I've seen her in person. She was wacky. I remember
Mm-hmm.
those it was like 2016, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Crazy. It was like 7 years ago.
I know.
All right. Well, we won't take too much of your time. Thank you very much for coming on. This is a great conversation. I think it's going to provide a lot of value for people to hear from, you know, a top 10 Olympian on what it takes and the discipline and the habits that you're going to need to take a goal very far. So for Emily Schubert, Shannon Seeley, I'm Tommy Stiles. Till next time, we're out of here.